The topic we are discussing today is theoretical perspectives in social psychology. The objectives of this module are: after reading this chapter, you will be able to answer the following questions. What is the difference between middle range theories and theoretical perspectives? What is role theory, reinforcement theory, social learning theory, and social exchange theory? Beginning with few observations regarding social behavior, social psychologists elaborately and systematically attempt to formulate a theory to explain the observed facts. A theory is a set of interrelated propositions that organizes and explains a set of observed phenomena. Theories usually pertain not just to some particular event, but to a whole class of events. A theory goes beyond mere observable facts by postulating causal relations among variables. And if a theory is valid, it enables to explain the phenomena and to make predictions about events not yet observed. In social psychology, no single theory explains all phenomena of interest. Rather, the field includes many different theories. Now, it is useful to distinguish between two types of theories. The two types of theories are middle range theories and theoretical perspectives. Middle range theories are narrow, focused frameworks that identify the conditions that produce a specific social behavior. They are usually scientific and causal in nature, that is, they are formulated in terms of cause and effect. For example, one middle range theory tries to explain the processes by which persuasion leads to attitude change. Another middle range theory tries to specify how majorities and minorities within groups differ qualitatively in the ways they influence their targets. In addition to middle range theories, social psychology includes theoretical perspectives. Theoretical perspectives, in contrast, are broader in scope than middle range theories. Theoretical perspectives offer general explanations for a wide array of social behaviors in a variety of situations. These general explanations are rooted in explicit assumptions about human nature. Theoretical perspectives serve an important function for the field of social psychology. By making certain assumptions regarding human nature, a theoretical perspective establishes a vantage point from which we can examine a range of social behaviors. Because any perspective highlights certain features and downplays others, it enables us to see more clearly certain aspects of social behavior. The fundamental value of any theoretical perspective lies in its applicability across many situations. It provides a frame of reference for interpreting and comparing a wide range of social situations and behaviors. Social psychology can be organized into a number of distinct theoretical perspectives. The five central perspectives of social psychology are role theory, reinforcement theory, cognitive theory, symbolic interaction theory, and evolutionary theory. According to role theory, our behavior is guided by role expectations held by other people. Roles consist of a set of rules, that is, expectations held by others that function as plans or blueprints and guide behavior. In everyday life, we all perform roles. Anyone who holds a job for that matter is performing a role. For instance, an advertising executive's work role will certainly specify what goal should be pursued, what tasks must be done, and what performances are required. The theoretical perspective that best addresses behavior of this type is role theory. Role theory holds that a substantial proportion of observable day-to-day social behavior is persons carrying out their roles as much as actors carry out their roles on the stage or cricket players performing on the field. The propositions of role theory are: people spend much of their lives participating as members of groups and organizations. Within these groups, people occupy distinct positions such as manager, advertising executive, professor, or police officer and the like. Each of these positions entail a role, which is a set of functions performed by the person for the group. A person's role is defined by expectations held by other group members that specify how he or she should perform. Groups often formalize these expectations as norms, which are rules specifying how a person should behave, what rewards will result from performance, and what punishment will result for non-performance. Individuals usually carry out these roles and perform in accordance with the prevailing norms. In other words, people are primarily conformists. They try to meet the expectations held by others. Group members check each individual's performance to determine whether it conforms with the group norms or not. If an individual meets the role expectations held by others, then he or she will receive rewards in some form, for example, acceptance, approval, money, and so on. If he or she fails to perform as expected, however, then the group members may embarrass, punish, or even expel that individual from the group. The anticipation that others will apply sanctions ensures performance as expected. So what is the impact of roles? Role theory implies that if we as analysts have information about the role expectations for a specified position, we can then predict a significant portion of the behavior of the person occupying that position. According to role theory, to change a person's behavior, it is necessary to change or redefine his or her role. This might be done by changing the role expectation held by others with respect to that person, or by shifting that person into an entirely different role. For example, if a person is promoted from being a team member to a team leader, he or she would have to change to match the role demands of the new position. Though they may experience some strain while adjusting to the new role, the behavior will change. Role theory maintains that a person's role determines not only behavior but also beliefs and attitudes. In other words, individuals bring their attitude into congruence with the expectations that they define their roles with. A change in roles should lead to a change in attitude. For instance, imagine that in a company of many employees, only few are promoted to the posts of a team leader or a manager or executive officer. There is a greater chance that the recently promoted individuals would express more positive attitude towards the company than those who are not promoted. Thus, we see that the employees' attitudes shifted to fit their new roles as predicted by the role theory. So, in general, the roles that people occupy not only channel their behavior but also shape their attitudes. Roles can influence the values people hold and affect the direction of their personal growth and development. But what are the limitations of role theory? Despite its usefulness, role theory has difficulty explaining certain kinds of social behavior. Foremost among these is deviant behavior, which is any behavior that violates or contravenes the norms defining a given role. Most forms of deviant behavior, whether simply refusing to perform as expected or something more serious like committing a crime, disrupt interpersonal relations. Deviant behavior poses a challenge to role theory because it contradicts the assumption that people are essentially conformists. Deviant behavior violates the demands of roles. In general, however, deviant behavior is as unexplained and problematic exception from the standpoint of role theory. Even critiques of role theory acknowledge that a substantial portion of all social behavior can be explained as conformity to established role expectations. But role theory does not and cannot explain how role expectations came to be or what they are in the first place. Nor does it explain when and how role expectations change. Thus, role theory provides only a partial explanation of social behavior. Reinforcement theory is another major perspective on social behavior. The theory begins with the premise that social behavior is governed by external events. Its central proposition is that people will more likely to perform a specific behavior if it is followed directly by the occurrence of something pleasurable or by the removal of something aversive. Likewise, people will more likely refrain from performing a particular behavior if it is followed by the occurrence of something aversive or by the removal of something pleasurable. For example, if you are in a conversation with another person, that person is more likely to express his opinions if you show agreement or approval to it. Approval here acts as the reward. However, if you show disagreement or disapproval or take a neutral stance to his opinions, then that person will express fewer opinions. Here, disapproval or taking a neutral stance acts as something aversive. On the whole, a person's behavior during a conversation is substantially influenced by social approval. Let us look at some concepts of reinforcement theory. The reinforcement perspective holds that behavior is determined primarily by external events and not by internal states. Thus, the central concepts of reinforcement theory refer to events that are directly observable. Any event that leads to an alteration or change in behavior is called a stimulus. For example, a traffic light that changes to red is a stimulus, so is a wailing tsunami siren. The change in behavior introduced by a stimulus is called a response. Drivers responding to red light by stopping and families respond to tsunami siren by rushing to a shelter at a safer place. These act as the response. Another concept is reinforcement, which is any favorable outcome that results from a response. Reinforcement strengthens the response, that is, it increases the probability that the response will be repeated. A person's social approval acts as a positive reinforcer that strengthens the partner's response of expressing opinions. Responses that are not reinforced tend to disappear or not be repeated. Reinforcement is important in some forms of learning, most notably through conditioning. In conditioning, a contingency or connection is established between emitting a response and subsequently receiving reinforcement. If a person emits a particular response and this response is then reinforced, the connection between the response and the reinforcement is strengthened. That is, the person will more likely emit the same response in the future in hopes of again receiving the reinforcement. Another related process is stimulus discrimination. This occurs when a person learns the exact conditions under which a response will be reinforced. For example, Satish, a young child, learns that if his mother rings the dinner bell, which acts as a stimulus, he should respond by coming indoors, washing his hands and sitting in appropriate place at the table. His mother then serves him food, which acts as a reinforcer. However, he has also learned that if he performs the same response, that is washing his hands and sitting down at the table, without first hearing the stimulus, that is the dinner bell, his mother simply tells him that he is too early and cannot have food until later. Thus, Satish has learned to discriminate between stimulus condition and non-stimulus condition, and he knows when the reinforcement is obtained, when he only makes the response in the presence of a specific stimulus. Here, it is the ringing of the bell. There are two theories based on the principle of reinforcement. The first is social learning theory and secondly, social exchange theory. Although learning based on reinforcement and conditioning is important, it is not the only form of learning. A central proposition of social learning theory is that a person, that is the learner, can acquire new responses simply by observing the behavior of another person who acts as the model. This observational learning process is called imitation. Imitation is distinguished by the fact that the learner neither performs a response nor receives any reinforcement. Many social responses are learned through imitation. For instance, children learn ethnic and regional speech patterns by imitating adult speakers around them. In imitation, the learner watches the model's behavior and thereby comes to understand how to behave in a similar manner. Learning of this type can occur without any external reinforcement. But the issue of whether the learner will actually perform the behaviors learned through observation may depend on the consequences that the performance has for the learner, that is, on whether the learner receives reinforcement for the performance or not. For example, a young girl might observe her older sister putting on makeup before going out with friends. In fact, if she watches closely enough, she might learn precisely how to apply makeup the right way. But whether the little girl actually puts makeup on herself and wears it around the house may depend heavily on whether she receives any reinforcement for doing so. If she knows, for instance, that her mother strongly disapproves of little girls wearing cosmetics, she may hesitate to use what she has learned from her elder sister. On the whole, social learning theory holds that individuals acquire new responses through conditioning and imitation. Both conditioning and imitation are important processes in socialization, and they help to explain how persons acquire complex social behaviors. Another important process based on the principle of reinforcement is social exchange. Social exchange theory uses the concept of reinforcement to explain stability and change in relations between individuals. This theory assumes that individuals have freedom of choice and often face social situations in which they must choose among alternative actions. Any action provides some rewards and entails some costs. There are many kinds of socially mediated rewards, such as money, goods and services, prestige or status, approval by others, and the like. The theory posits that individuals are hedonistic, that is, they try to maximize rewards and minimize costs. Consequently, they choose actions that produce good profits and avoid actions that produce poor profits. Concepts of this type apply not only to work relations but also to personal relations. For instance, studies of heterosexual couples in long-term dating relationships show that rewards and costs can explain whether persons stay in or exit from such relationships. The results of these studies indicate that individuals are more likely to stay when the partner is physically and personally attractive. Also, when the relationship does not entail undue hassles such as high monetary costs, broken promises, arguments, and also when romantic involvements with attractive outsiders are not readily available. In other words, they are more likely to stay when the rewards are high and the costs are low, and the alternatives are unpromising. Effects of this type are predicted by social exchange theory. Social exchange theory also predicts the conditions under which people try to change or restructure their relationships. A central concept involved is equity. A state of equity exists in a relationship when the participants feel that the rewards they receive are proportional to the costs they bear. For example, a supervisor may earn more money than a line worker and receive better benefits on the job. But the line worker may nevertheless feel that the relationship is equitable because the supervisor bears more responsibility and has higher level of education. If for some reason a participant feels that the allocation of rewards and costs in a relationship is inequitable, then the relationship is potentially unstable. People find inequity difficult to tolerate, that is, they may feel cheated or exploited and become angry. Social exchange theory predicts that people will try to modify an inequitable relationship. Most likely, they will attempt to reallocate costs and rewards so that the equity is established. There are few limitations of reinforcement theory. Despite its usefulness in understanding why relationships change and how people learn, reinforcement theory has been criticized on various grounds. One criticism is that reinforcement theory portrays individuals primarily as reacting to environmental stimuli rather than as initiating behavior based on imaginative or creative thought. The theory does not account easily for creativity, innovation, or invention. A second criticism is that reinforcement theory largely ignores or downplays other motivations. It characterizes social behavior as hedonistic, with individuals striving to maximize profits from outcomes. Thus, it cannot easily explain selfless behavior such as altruism and martyrdom. Despite its limitations, reinforcement theory has enjoyed substantial success in explaining why individuals persist in emitting certain behaviors, how they learn new behaviors, and how they influence the behaviors of others through exchange.